Cool. Thank you for having me. So yes, as Tomo mentioned, I'm Brennan. I'm a senior software engineer from Sydney, Australia, working for an e-commerce startup. So we're about 4 years old, and we got funding 4 years ago, and lots more since then. And we deal with fashion. So we sell clothes online to whoever wants them in Australia. Most of you won't have heard of The Iconic, but that's fine. So a little bit about me. I'm Zen certified. We do PHP in-house, so apologies for that. You can catch me on Twitter as well. There is a longer version to this talk. If you want to see it, ping me on Twitter and I can fire you a URL to it. I've shortened this one for today. I have an awesome cat, which I like to dress up just for fun. She hates it, but it's fun, so. Cool. So today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about APM and what you should be using it for in your business. And I'm going to walk you through a use case that we had in-house. Now, I gave this talk at the first Australian user group for New Relic. I built a whole stack for it, and the day before we had this massive incident, so I threw the stack out and rebuilt it, and this is it. So this is your kind of dashboard that you may or may not have in your office. We have huge wallboards with certain details on, especially the New Relic dashboards. We use the basic ones that come out of the box. We have analytics dashboards, and we have other dashboards as well, some insights data as well. This is what you should see on a normal day. You've got your standard throughput graphs, everything looks great. Transactions, nothing looks out of order there. Just so you know, although it's quite hard to read, I have modified the slides somewhat because there's certain things I'm not allowed to give out. My company gets funny about it. But anyway, this is your standard dashboard. This is what everything should look like. So I'm going to tell you a story. Now, this story happened, it was early in the morning. I came into work, and I needed coffee. So it was one of those days, walking, there's no one else in the office. It's about 8 o'clock. And I look around, the boards are on all the time. I look up and see this, and it was early. So as you can see, there's a few things that once you get to know your dashboards, you'll know instantly whether something's wrong. I'll walk around the office and just glance at them, and you usually know almost straight away if something is wrong. I did know something was wrong. So the response times are up to 1750. You can see there's a massive spike there in the external response times. The app dex is dropping off. Again, the app dex is an indication of how your system's performing and how your customers are feeling about that. The error rate jumped. Now, the error rate here, we have and we try to have a 0.02 average, and it's that because that's what it is, error rate in our platform. So this jumped up to 0.75. Might not seem like much, but the way our stack's built, it actually is indicative of something wrong in one of our secondary systems. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I ignored this, and I went and made coffee. I have to go down 2 floors. I have to put the machine together, do all this stuff. And during this time, I start getting notices that something's wrong. So New Relic's great at this, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but they love to give you loads of information, and you can get more. So you start getting emails, you start getting text messages from PagerDuty, you start getting alerts on the applications and all that sort of stuff. So I knew something was wrong, but it's coffee. Anyway, so I came back to my desk maybe a few minutes later, and I guess this is where we start getting into the APM product properly. So I came back to my desk. It had been a few minutes, so the errors have started piling up. The notifications have come through, the emails have come through, the text messages have come through. So the very first thing I do with pretty much any incident is I come to APM. And I load it up and come to the error screen. Now, these awesome guys at New Relic have, yesterday, announced a whole load of updates to this screen, so I need to update it. But with some of the new filtering and stuff, it will make my job a whole lot easier and your jobs as well. This screen for us is one of the most important screens in the product. There's a whole ton of features, but we want to know and we need to know what is wrong in our application at any one time. It's great to know what's okay, but when things go wrong, you want to know why and how and get to results quickly. So I pulled this up. So I can see on here that there is something wrong. Now, the errors will give you full stack traces if you want, which I think I have on the next screen. So you can click through into any errors. You'll be able to see the full stack trace. I've pulled a whole load out because I don't want you seeing it. And so this screen is quite important. If you're a developer, you can say, OK, cool. This is where I need to go in my code to at least know roughly where to look next. And I actually know this is an adapter that was failing into one of our other systems. So that gives me a good idea where to look. Just while we're on this screen, if you guys aren't using insights or aren't using custom attributes, I strongly recommend you start playing with them. They're super simple to implement. We do some cool stuff. So e-commerce company, we have customers, and customers use our front end. So we log things like the customer ID, the gender, whether they're a guest or not, what their session ID is. And I'll tell you more about that in a sec. And then you've also got the basic New Relic custom attributes. And this stuff is a godsend. So the reason we store the session ID is so we can go back into New Relic, into insights, drill down and see exactly what a customer's done over the duration of their trip. So what pages did they visit? What did they do on the site? And whatever else. And it allows us to track them in a creepy little way. So yeah, do use that stuff. It helps a lot. Didn't help in this case, but it helps a lot. So I know now that this has a problem in our backend system. So what I do, New Relic, click on top left, switch systems. We've got about 4 or 5 different systems all monitored through New Relic. So the next step is to work out what's actually broken. So this is our transaction breakdown. Again, I modified it. The transaction breakdown allows us to see exactly how long certain processes are taking. So what I do is order it by most time consuming, because that's usually a good indication of what's taking too long. And once you get to know your platform, know your app, you'll know roughly what looks right and what doesn't. What I could do is dive into here. So I know it's in our web service because I'm now in our backend system. And we separate our backend and front end intentionally so that we can deliver the fastest experience to a customer and leave our slow MySQL database in the backend just for keeping consistency between the two systems. So if someone adds to their cart or purchases. So this is actually, as part of this story anyway, where I ended up. So I came in, went into the transaction details, and I can see really quickly. I'm not going to try and make the screen bigger because I think I'll break it. But I can see from here that the slowest components are in our selects and insert statements. This select at the top is taking 68,000 milliseconds, which, as you can guess, is way too slow for any product. So this is good enough for me. What I do now, I know it's a database. I know there's an issue. I can switch to the database, get into the RDS stack, and work out what's going on. You want to drill down into your processes. You want to know what's going on. You need this information. If you don't have it, install the RDS plugins. Get the actual root cause of your data. In our case, we had a deadlock in the database, which should never happen. Apparently it does. But we try and mitigate. We learn from our mistakes as we go on. So how do we know? If you guys haven't tied all the products together, do it. We tie and we use massively HipChat. So HipChat's one of our biggest engineering tools and resources. As you can see at the bottom here, we post whenever issues are raised in New Relic. They end up in HipChat. Now you can use Slack, whatever you want. We get dashboard notifications, as you can see, graphs jumping. We get web applications from the New Relic app, which, if you ask me, isn't as great as it could be, but they'll make improvements there, I'm sure. We get emails, we get text messages, we get basically whatever you want. You can tie in almost anything into New Relic, and that's one of the reasons it makes it pretty cool. If you haven't seen, HipChat has some new updates coming out, which are going to make this even more awesome. You'll be able to acknowledge and make certain changes to the actual alerts as and when they come in. I put that in because it's fun. Too many notifications, but I don't know if you saw the presentation yesterday on notification fatigue. It's one of the processes you have to go through. So you will work through, you'll have too many notifications, and that's a good thing when you start out. Have as much as you need to get the job done, to alert yourself, and then try and work out what you don't need and try and scale that back. So for us, how bad was it? It was kind of bad. Our system's built to be resilient to allow us to fail, but obviously there's a certain amount. The checkout, for example, cannot fail. In this case, the downtime, yeah, we were probably down. The checkout was down for about half an hour. And then as a follow-on, we had another spike a bit later on, but there's nothing we can do. So we recovered as fast as we can, and New Relic was the reason for that. And if you don't have these tools set up, you're losing the battle already. So I want to touch on a couple of hidden gems inside of New Relic as well. One of them is key transactions. So within our stack, we keep track of certain steps that users have to take, adding to cart, checkouts, catalogs, adding to your wish list, the things that you consider major to a user's journey. Set them up. They're pretty straightforward. It's pretty much just a URL, and you can set alerts based on thresholds. So if this page takes over 10 seconds for, say, the checkout where you've got to call your payment gateway and stuff, trigger an alert. I don't think you can do the other way. If it's under, that would be nice. But maybe in the new beta alerts, keep track of all this data. It's really useful. And the key transactions also come out and tie into other areas of New Relic as well, and other products. So keep track of them. They're really useful. And they go red as well if something's wrong, so you can have a dashboard to say, hey, the checkout's failing, especially in a microservice setup. That's really useful. External services as well. So external services, often it's not your code that breaks, it's someone else's. In this case, we found something really cool. So Bob's our backend, Bob and Alice is our front end. We found out overnight the external services peak, so the throughput and response times. Now, we're an Australian-based company, but we really wanted to know why overnight our systems seem to get slower. And in this case, we actually found out they get slower because you guys, Americans and English people, everything else, come to our website when we're all asleep, and there's a latency increase, and we're getting less cache hits and a few other things. But the external services are one of those parts of the system you should keep track on. If you've got browser as well, keep track on the external services for your JavaScript. Third-party JavaScript going down can kill your site. It can block rendering of content and other things. And I'm pretty, I went a bit faster. There's a few other cool stuff inside of New Relic that I do suggest you look at. So if you don't necessarily auto-scale, use the reports. There's some reports there to allow you to keep track of projected load on your systems. So whether your systems are going to fail over at a certain throughput or not. These parts of the product are really useful. For us, we've moved to the AWS in the last, I guess, year. But we used to have massive beefy servers there. But we knew, based on the New Relic reporting and the throughput, that when we hit a certain amount of load, our servers are going to fail. So dive into the reports, dive into the apps. For deployments, you've got deployment notifications. You can mark all your graphs, say, hey, deployment happened here and here. So when you see spikes in alerts, you'll often see, hey, there was a deployment, and then the alerts pick up. I'm out of time, I think. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions. Otherwise, I will leave it there.